Hey everyone, this is James from Italian Poliziotteschi and Giallo Reviews. Today I'm going to be doing a little bit of a different episode. I'm going to be talking about kind of a pyramid structure of the levels of a Giallo fan. So why? Mostly just for fun, but just also to kind of explore the different levels of fandom that you can have, kind of going from like the freaks that have watched the most amount of Giallo they can, to kind of the more casual levels. So just going to be kind of breaking down, starting from the very tippy top of the pyramid and working our way down. You could make this list for Poliziotteschi too, but in general it's a genre where it's like Giallo, it has this, and Poliziotteschi you would have to like start the tip of the pyramid at a little bit of a lower point, because those films are pretty much all cult classics at the most seen. So going to be kind of using Letterboxd as sort of the proxy for just how popular these are. Of course, it's a little bit of a limited thing because your Letterboxd undoubtedly filters to kind of a younger demographic, but still I think it's an interesting way to look at sort of the cultural relevance of these films now. So yeah, definitely kind of a pyramid structure is how we think of it. So the very top level of the pyramid I have are the casuals. So this is defined, in my opinion, as something about 20,000 views or more on Letterboxd. And so you're going to end up with about 12-ish films here. And they're all going to be all Argento, Fulci, and Bava. You could definitely call yourself a fan if you've seen 12 of these. In fact, probably most people haven't seen 12. The most views for any of these films is 126,000 for Deep Red. And I think with these films, you could get a very skewed view of what a Giallo is, because it's very dominant by kind of Argento and Bava, who both had, somewhat similar visions, especially if we're looking at Blood and Black Lace for Bava, of kind of the Giallo. You're going to get a little bit of diversity by tossing Fulci in there, but it's not quite the same as, having some of those deeper cuts. So you'll definitely have a very Argento-centric view of the Giallo if you do this, just because, the 12-ish most famous films, probably 7 or 8 of them, are by Argento. Okay, and so the next level down is the level where you can sort of impress the casuals. So I define this as over 10,000 views. So this is where you get to start adding in interesting people like Sergio Martino, and basically the rest of kind of Fulci and Argento. There's 25 to 30 films, so you're basically doubling it. Still, no other directors. So that's worth noting, just the fact that if you are watching the most seen Giallo films, you're pretty much only watching films by kind of like the big 4 directors there. And it's why sort of that Mount Rushmore list that I talk about is kind of interesting to me, just because you're getting you're just watching certain directors, and of course there are a lot of the very, very big key collaborators you're going to see at this point. You'll have seen some Edwidge Fenech and George Hilton pairings written by Ernesto Gastaldi. You'll have seen films by kind of those big 4 directors. But one thing about the Giallo is it has a really deep bench. And what do I mean by that? I mean the films that, would be a little bit less popular than even this list on the pyramid are still really good and still very much worth watching, which brings me to my next tier, so tier C, and that's greater than 5,000. So this is where you start to integrate other directors. And I think this is also where the Giallo shines a little bit over something like the spaghetti western. I don't know if I'm alone in this, but for me at least, the spaghetti western falls off quite a bit once you kind of get beyond the 3 Sergios and a handful of the films outside of that. There's a lot of kind of like the 30th best spaghetti western, I think, is worse than the 30 best Giallo, in my opinion. So that's kind of interesting. I also think the Poliziotteschi bench is pretty deep there, but my standards for that, I think, are a little bit different than it comes here. And so one interesting thing that I did note is this is basically same as Eurocrime Tier 1. This is where you're getting stuff like Caliber 9, Italian Connection, just because that genre is so much less seen than them. So that hopefully can give a little bit of perspective here. This is where you start to integrate filmmakers like Otto Lotto, Luciano Arcoli, The Black Belly of Tarantula, films like that. So I think very, very good films that are definitely worth watching, and I think could very well be in someone's top 5 or 10 favorites, certainly. You also will have other directors like Pupi Avati's House with Laughing Windows. Absolutely love that film. So you're getting into some very interesting films here, and this is like you've seen 50-ish films. Of course, you can go even further. one thing that's great about the Giallo is so many of these have been released on Blu-ray. So you're not, like most of those 50-ish that you could watch, those have been released on Blu-ray. So you can watch them in fantastic quality. I think that's something that's really important for the Giallo, because one of the key elements that I especially like of it is the craftsmanship. Not just like the direction and the actors and whatnot, but the cinematography and the scores are fantastic. And just having those things in the best quality that you can see them in, I think is really important. And I think is one thing that really sets apart fans that are coming into the genre now versus maybe 30 years ago when you're watching Deep Red or the Hatchet Murders on like a different cut than the Argento version, but just crummy VHS copy for 85 minutes. Okay, so next up you have the greater than 1,000 views. This is 150-ish films. Again, a lot of these have had Blu-rays. Shout outs to Vinegar Syndrome and their Forgotten Jolly sets. They have started to get into some titles where I'm not sure if I love them so much, but they have also released some very decent ones here. I'm a fan of Autopsy, especially that came out in the original one. Some of them are pretty good too, I would say. So here you're definitely going to get a lot more of a mixed bag. Not everything here is great. I would say of that tier C, most of those are pretty good films. Here you're definitely going to uncover a hidden gem or a film that hits you in a certain way that others don't. But I think you're definitely going to have some where you're like, okay, I wish I could fast forward a little bit more. And then at the very bottom of the list, I have the Freaks tier, and this is where you're at the deep annals of the Giallo. It's basically the bottom of the pyramid, where you're starting to question some of your life's decisions. You're maybe on the YouTube channel Guns and Drugs, which has been renamed several different times and has a picture of Maurizio Merli on there. You're watching VHS rips with like fuzzy things in the middle of the screen. Might just say something weird in Italian in the middle of the screen. Maybe you're watching the Spanish version, which is Spanish dubbed instead of Italian, or the German version. And this is the point that I've been, and you really start to question some of your life's choices here. You might question, am I actually Troy Howarth? So this is where you run into stuff like Death on Four Poster, Siege of Terror, Skinned Under the Claws. So some very, very deep ones. And of course, this sort of like the tier up from them. It's a very mixed bag. Occasionally you'll run into something that, or occasionally I ran into something that I like quite a bit. Aldo Lotto's TV movie I liked a lot, Death on Telvada. That's a review I brought on a year or two ago. So yeah, that concludes kind of the 5 tiers of Giallo fandom. So the casuals, these are films, again, with 20,000 or more views. There's about a dozen of them. Next up is tier B, which is about 25 to 30 films. You're basically still doing all kind of like the big 4 directors, Fulci, Argento, Bava, as well as Martino. And then you have next up 50-ish films for 5,000 or more views on Letterboxd. Then you have 1,000 or more views, which is still a lot of views on Letterboxd. That's 150-ish films, and then you get to the deep annals. So which level of fan are you? Let me know. Let me know how you like this episode, and I'll see you all next time. Cheers.